Hi, Service95 Book Club. My name is David Szalay and I'm the author of Flesh, which is Doer's monthly read for October. I'm going to be talking about 5 books which influence Flesh in some way. I'm going to start with Ultraluminous by a writer called Catherine Four. And this was a book which kind of came into my hands more or less entirely at random in the very early stage of writing Flesh. Or maybe we could even say before Flesh was Flesh, while it was still just a sort of idea taking shape in my mind. And this book, Ultraluminous, was, I think, very influential on that very early part of the process of Flesh, because it's a book about a cool girl in New York City. It's written in an incredibly sort of detached and dispassionate way, very concrete, very specific. It builds up to a great emotional, it packs a great emotional punch ultimately, but it achieves that through the gradual accumulation of detail and of this very dry prose, and through this very dry prose style. And I think that those things really influenced how I approached writing Flesh and the style of that novel. The next book I'm going to talk about is Lord Jim by Joseph Conrad, which I also read while I was at work on Flesh. I should say I reread it because I read it initially at school as a set book, and I didn't really like it at that time, but I still had the copy. I still have today the copy that I read at school, and I noticed it on the bookshelf one day when I was avoiding doing writing, and took it down just out of curiosity to read the first few pages. And I ended up reading the whole book over the next week or so, and I absolutely loved it, in contrast to my reaction to it 30 years earlier. It's an amazing book about stories set at sea in Southeast Asia about 1900. So superficially, it's a very sort of action-packed story in a way, but it's really about morality, the nature of morality, the nature of moral failure, and whether redemption is possible, and if so, how that might happen. And that was also something that I think fed into Flesh as I was working on it. Platform by Michel Wellbeck. I'm a big fan of Wellbeck's writing. I've read most of his books and I have enjoyed them all enormously. He's a writer who is both sort of addictively readable and sort of morally and intellectually fascinating, and that's a wonderful combination. And this book is obviously no exception. It's set among people who work in the tourist industry, and that sounds like the sort of modern, commodified commercial tourist industry, and that sounds like a pretty dull setting for a book, but he somehow manages to make it absolutely fascinating, and, as I say, addictively readable. And it's full of vulgarity and sex, and it just feels very embedded in today's world, in the world that we actually live in, and it feels like it's really grappling with that world in a way that really, like all of his novels, made a huge impression on me. Hamlet by William Shakespeare. This is not really a kind of unknown gem that I'm putting forward here. But it was also a book that was in my mind as I was writing Flesh. It's referenced in Flesh a couple of times. There are some pretty obvious narrative parallels between the story of Hamlet and the story that unfolds in Flesh. And also I see Hamlet as a book about masculinity and about a kind of crisis in masculinity happening centuries ago. And I don't really like it when Flesh is too much pigeonholed as a book about masculinity, but I can't deny that that's part of what it's about. So yes, Hamlet was definitely in the mix in my mind when I was writing Flesh, both as a sort of narrative, both in terms of narrative structure and in terms of the themes of masculinity and what it means to be a man, which is very much a question in the play as well, I think. The last book is Jacob's Room by Virginia Woolf, and I love most of Virginia Woolf's novels. To the Lighthouse actually is probably my favorite, but this one is kind of more relevant for Flesh because it is a story of one individual, one man, told through a series of glimpses, effectively, of decontextualized glimpses, very much physical glimpses, really. You see him, you're not really privy to his inner thoughts in any of the moments that you see him, starting when he's a small child and going up to when he's a young man, I guess about 30 at the end. But that was very influential, I think, in the structure of Flesh, which also consists of a series of glimpses, effectively, a series of moments that together somehow make up a life. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. And I've also put together a music playlist relating to the book that you can find on the Service95 website.